the whole relationship between stress levels and sleep is so interconnected. When people say, well, what's the detriment in your health? And I kind of go, bad sleep brought on by high stress. And look, stress in and of itself is not bad. There are things like hormesis. You want some stress in your life. When I get in that ice bath every day at 5:00 p.m., I'm putting stress on my body, but with a bigger purpose of overall relaxing the body and shifting from sympathetic to parasympathetic. So a good thing, which also increases HRV, by the way, lowers heart rate, by the way, all the things we were just talking about. But not enough credence is talked about with people not managing their stress well, and that's impacting their sleep. I would argue probably that's the biggest contributor to bad sleep. Would you concur?
Yeah, it's a huge factor. So that regulation of the nervous system, and I think some of us might not realize how pervasive it can be just from even the source of how we're breathing, second to second to second. Are we mouth breathing versus nasal breathing? Exactly. Are we slouched over and affecting the diaphragm and the stomach? There's so many things that we can make these tweaks and behavioral shifts starting really when we first wake up, and then to like what you do with the preconditioning of your ability to notice when you're going into that fear state, like with an ice bath. I mean, it's a perfect way to immediately bring a sense of kind of all over full body fear, and to be able to face that head on and train the body to breathe differently, to relate differently. Those things are so great to precondition ourselves, because so much of what I'll often see for people with their sleep is that this pervasive experience of I just can't turn off my mind. My brain keeps going. I just want to turn it off. They want to switch. And so much of that comes from just an inability to hit the brake on that sympathetic state and be able to kind of tap into a parasympathetic state. And so training for that throughout the course of the day. Now, I'll have a lot of clients using like New Calm, Brain Tap, certainly ice baths, breath work, great resources, Oxygen Advantage, Breathe by James Nestor, different things to really get up under those topics can be huge.
I love 4-7-8 breathing. I do.
Yes, so simple.
I do 3 or 4 sessions of those, Molly. And as for those of you that don't know, you breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold it for 7 seconds, and then you breathe out for 8 seconds. So let's do that together real quick to kind of chill down.
Please.
All right, so here we go. And we all feel better.
Right? It's just like a full body reset. Thank you for doing that. I'm going to start doing that on the podcast. You're pro level.
It is amazing how something so simple, and this is the key, guys. This is why I wanted Mollie on here today, because I know Mollie does these things. You guys know I'm crazy into all these little things to optimize sleep. It's not for any other purpose than we want to be as optimal as we can. If we're all about being healthy in our diet and in our movement and in other parts of what we do, why don't we give enough credence to sleep in the same way? And I haven't always been this way, Mollie. I want to talk about some of the stupid stuff I did.
Great.
One of the ones, I'm not proud of it, but one of the things that I did over a decade ago now was I would use Tylenol cold. So the severe cold and sinus, whatever it's called, and it was a blue liquid. I remember I used to be able to buy it on the shelf. Then at some point they put it behind the pharmacy. I guess it was so addictive or whatever. And so there was some sleep aid in there, and I would pop it in my mouth, a big cup of it every single night, like a shot glass. And about an hour later, I would be out like a light.
Yes.
And it would help me go to sleep. And I was having trouble going to sleep. Did you ever do anything like that?
Yes, and yes, 100%. And unfortunately, for years, that was during that period when I was relating to, like, I just got to survive this problem or this kind of fixed innate thing where I just don't sleep great. That during that period of my life, I would lean into so many of those, and I'd have every single time there would be like a reason in my brain and say, oh, well, I gotta have a big day tomorrow. I got to get up for this, that, and I would take those things, and there would be that often that immediate response. Over time, I even had less of that response where it was becoming less effective. Unfortunately, that's often the experience that so many people have. And that's not even getting into what was the quality of the sleep that I was getting. So that's where that kind of vicious cycle can often happen, because then our concern with having some of those antihistamines, the kind of Benadryl effect and what have you, is that when we have those night after night, then it seems to impact some of the sleep staging that we're going through, and that over time there seems to be link-ups with potential for dementia, Alzheimer's, and other neurodegenerative issues. So while if something happens or you have a reaction or you are truly sick, maybe that can be a time from an acute standpoint to lean into some of those things. But for a long, for an actual protocol for our life, we absolutely want to see what is broken that's having us have to do that.
It got so bad at one point, Molly, that I went to put this in my carry-on bag on an airplane.
I've done that too. Yes.
I had my bottle and I thought, okay,
it goes everywhere.
On a liquid, it'll come through, it'll get through. And they took it, and I was like bawling my eyes out because I'm like, no, I can't sleep without that. And it just became, that's when I realized that moment when they took my cold medicine away, I was like, I'm addicted.
Thank you for saying that, actually, because that's part of the beginning of the story for me when I went, because I was traveling internationally, and the problem was I hadn't brought it thinking that I could buy it there. And that was in my kind of naivete of that you can't actually, I wasn't able to get that in the EU, because it's not something that you can just kind of get over the counter there.
Right.
And so then I went subsequent nights, multiple nights, jet lagged, and then not having that thing that crushed. It was such a mental addiction too, because I had it that I needed that. I couldn't trust my own body to sleep, was the kind of background noise. And so then layer that on for days and days, then you're getting more anxious about it. You're in an unknown place. That was sort of a flare up for me. So 100%. And I appreciate your vulnerability in sharing that, because it's a very real thing that many people are leaning into right now.
Yes. And after I got past that and I was like, okay, I need something else. I thought I did something better. And here's another mistake I made. And guys, maybe you've done this because you've heard it helps with sleep. Melatonin. It's not a freebie. Like, I got some of the liquid melatonin. I remember it because it tasted like black cherry. It had the little thing and you could squirt it in your mouth. And I started off with just a few drops and it would knock me out. And I would do great. But then it was like the law of diminishing returns. After a while, I'd have to have 2 or 3 of those.
Yes.
And after a while, fill the whole syringe up and stick it in my mouth. And I was ending up getting like 80 milligrams of liquid melatonin. And at one point, it just stopped all the endogenous production of my own melatonin, so that I was highly dependent on this stuff. I remember it was Nora Gedgaudas, God bless her. Do you know Nora? Have you seen her work?
I don't, actually. I should get it. Yeah,
Primal Body, Primal Mind was her big book that she did. Anyway, she was in the paleo, and she's kind of a low carb too. But I told her about what I was doing melatonin. She's like, Jimmy, get off of that. And she's the one that helped me identify that I was overdosing on the melatonin. And now look, everybody's like, oh, it helps you sleep and high dose melatonin. And it's like, yes, but no. It was the cough syrup issue all over again.
Yeah. So the topic of melatonin is really, there's kind of a divide in the way people are thinking about it. There's 2 real camps. So one is the camp of, like you're saying, high dose melatonin. And there's certain studies that people will point to. And this is a big layer. You can almost have a whole discussion about just melatonin. But some of the studies that people point to, some effectiveness around things like cancer and some really egregious issues that people are dealing with. So there is that group. And then the camp that I find myself often being in, and since I really err on the side of so much of this behavioral change, because I know that we can do a number of things to help support our own production of melatonin. And we really want to ideally start there and see how we can get up under this topic, because the thing that I think is really important for all of us to remember is that melatonin is a hormone. And I think many of us forget that, because especially in the United States, it is available everywhere, and it's often in kids' formulations for cold and flu and what have you. And it makes it just seem like it's just a natural thing to help us sleep. What's the big deal? But do know that we go to other countries that often need a prescription to get melatonin. So please almost just think of that and have some reference for the fact that anytime you are taking really an exogenous hormone, you want to have some reference for that topic. And so from that place, the fact that melatonin is known as the hormone of darkness, it's known as the vampire hormone. And so with that, I know these names, but with that, it's so interesting, because if you are kind of creating, and I think we alluded to circadian rhythm entrainment, so really starting to have this overarching umbrella of circadian rhythm entrainment can help us produce that melatonin. There's a fantastic, really interesting study out of NASA where they found that because it's very important for astronauts, since the sun is rising and setting sometimes every 90 minutes when you're in shuttling through, fast speeds, then you want to really ensure that your astronauts are staying on a strong circadian rhythm. So they get really adamant about what that structure looks like and what the lighting looks like to help support that. So with that, they would look at two different groups they have the same lighting virtually, 24 hours a day, and what happens to melatonin production and cortisol and other things. And then in the dynamic lighting group, you'll see that when the dynamic element is there, it's bright light throughout the course of the day, but then it's very dim and then total darkness at night. That is when we see this amazing uptick in melatonin production naturally, without needing to go and get the dropper and the thing and high doses. And granted, I know there are individual cases. Certainly, there's sleep disorders, so do address those things, of course. But for the average person, begin there. Really look at those things, because you have so much power within you to shift this hormone in and of itself.
It's so great that you brought all of that up, because literally the next thing I did after Nora called me out was I started circadian rhythm entrainment by getting my eyes exposed to sun early in the day, before 10 a.m. You guys, you want to make sure you get that and don't look at the sun. Yeah, you can have it shining on you without looking at it, because people are like, look at it, I'll go blind. Well, don't be an idiot. But get it that time of day, and then maybe around noon to 2, try to get it again, then get it like in the afternoon, and then right as the sun is setting, you're telling your brain when you do that, hey, dummy, that was morning, this is the middle of the day, this is the afternoon, and this is night. And like you said, shoom. And when that sun goes down, Molly, now, and here in South Carolina right now, this time of year, it goes down around 5:30 at night.
Yeah.
I am sleepy at like 6 o'clock. And I'm like, and it's why I go to bed so early now, because that melatonin endogenous production, which is so ironic. 10 years ago, I was taking it. Now I'm making so much of it that I'm just like falling asleep. And sometimes I will go to bed at say 6:30. And then I'm up at say 12:30. I'll be up for a few hours and I get that couple more hours sleep, but I've had my nights of sleep. And so it's a thing, guys. It's a real thing.
Absolutely. And I think, especially, I mentioned that I'm particularly passionate too about the my type A anxiety folks that are struggling with the issues of the inability to fall asleep, or they know themselves to maybe fall asleep, but then they wake up and then they're up and then they're anxious because they're up, or they're upset about it, or what have you. And so one of the amazing things that happen when we lean into circadian rhythm entrainment, and really it's just a fancy series of words to really have us align with these rhythms of nature. And I don't know about you, but in the past, before going through and learning what I learned, that might have seemed like, oh, come on, that can't be as powerful as the supplements or the drugs or the whatever. It is so powerful, and it's so innate and hardwired in our biology to just be aligned with those things. So that would keep us on track for so many thousands of years. So to bring that back in, it can actually, I think, can be such an incredible even productivity hack, because you start to almost relate to your days where you got this period of sunlight and you're going, and this is when you move and you get your high body temperature. you're eating during this time, because of course eating can raise your body temperature and your heart rate and what have you. But then once the sun sets, then you're starting to shift over to kind of night mode, and then lowering your body temperature, lowering your ambient temperature in your environment. So in the long term, absolutely houses will be more fitted to kind of the circadian nature. So you won't even think about this. If you are in a smart home, maybe you might be wary of that for EMFs or what have you. But if down the road, certainly thermostats will have the capability to kind of just set that tone for us so that it's warmer during the day, much, much cooler at night. And then you're eating less is really our goal in the evenings, because we know that that can have kind of, if any of the people are wearing different trackers,